And speaking of young people, a new survey says that 3 out of 5 millennials feel that life is more stressful now than it has ever been before. They even listed their reasons. Sure, a couple of generations ago, young men their age and much younger were charging into withering machine gun fire on the beaches of Normandy, but those guys didn't have to deal with micro stressors like slow Wi-Fi, breaking the glass on your cell phone, or getting 0 likes on social media. I mean, 0 likes. No wonder they're stressed. One millennial book author, which isn't an oxymoron, but probably ought to be, says he's found the problem. It's capitalism. His arguments reveal a lot more about millennials than he thinks. So here's a guy that's open I did about the stress that young people are feeling. That's a real survey. They're just saying they feel terribly stressed. They're more stressed than ever before. When they break their cell phones, they don't get any likes. And these are millennials, so that's 1980, I think, to 2000. So you're talking about people from 19 to 39, probably skewing a little bit younger than that. And a guy has written a book, a millennial guy has written a book. He's a Marxist, and he wrote a book called Kids These Days, Human Capital and the Making of Millennials. And he's the editor of an online magazine, The New Inquiry, and he was interviewed by a millennial at Vox named Sean Illing. And Illing asked him what makes the millennials the way they are. And he says in this book that Harris is trying to find out why millennials are so burned out. Why are they having fewer kids? Why are they getting married later? Why are they obsessed with efficiency and technology? Why is it so very hard to be a millennial? And I know, if you're like me, you sort of think the same thing. You think like, gee, people who charged into Normandy, some of them were 18 years old, and maybe that was a little harder than what these guys are going through, but they feel it. They feel that this is stressful, and it may just be relative stress. But here's what Malcolm Harris says. He says, this is the author of the book, he says, I take a very Marxist perspective on the world, so I'm looking at the dynamics of the labor market, the relationship between employers and the employed, basically the entire economic environment. These are the dominant forces shaping life in my view. What I focused on is millennials as workers and the changing relationship between labor and capital during the time we all came of age and developed into people. If we want to understand why millennials are the way they are, then we have to look at the increased competition between workers, the increased isolation of workers from each other, the extreme individualism of modern American society, and the widespread problems of debt and economic security facing this generation. And one of the things is, because these people are 19 to 39, a lot of them came of age under Clinton, Bush, and Obama. And some of these things, like the competition between workers and wages not going up, have been solved by Donald Trump. So I'm sure this Marxist is sitting there going, hooray for Donald Trump. Possibly not. But some of these things have been solved by a better economy. The thing that always solves the economy: cutting taxes, cutting regulations, letting business do business, letting people compete, and letting capitalism do its work. But he goes on, and Sean Illing, the interviewer, says, part of what you're saying is that modern capitalism, often referred to as neoliberalism for some reason, has created a world in which everything is about competition and self-interest and productivity, and as a result, corporations are squeezing more out of workers and making it harder for individuals to even think of themselves as part of a community. Is that more or less the picture you're painting? Malcolm Harris says, I mean, that's what neoliberalism is, right? We're all individuals, not members of a class or a community. We're all economic agents pursuing our self-interest. This is the basis of our whole society right now, and both Republicans and Democrats have signed on to it. Now, let's think about that for a minute. Let's think about what this guy is saying, because he doesn't really seem to have thought this through very carefully. First of all, if you go back to, say, the 50s, it was a capitalist time then. I think in some ways it was probably stronger capitalism, less involvement from the government, less regulation from the government going on at that time. And were there communities? Yes, there was. What happened to break down the communities? Was it capitalism that broke down the communities, or was it the death of other things like religion? Was it the fact that welfare came into the home and said, we will do things, the government will do things for you that used to be done by your family, by your church, by your club, your Elks Club, or whatever it was? Those, what they call mediating institutions, have lost power because the government has gained power. There's nothing in capitalism that necessarily keeps you from being a community. The problem is, though, the community of socialism is a community of force. And this is what millennials, I think, and young people in general never, ever take into account. Socialism is about the state, right? The state never gives you anything without taking something. Now, if you have a church that you go to willingly, if you have a club that you join willingly, that's a community. But when Hillary Clinton says it takes a village to raise a child, the village she's talking about is the government. Remember, Al Gore said the government is just things we do together, right? But no, it's not. The government is a power that is a power center that our founders warned us would generate more power all the time, would seek to expand and seek to get better. That's why they enumerated in the Constitution its powers. And over the years, especially since the turn of the century, through court decisions and through bad governance, those powers have gone beyond, have expanded past the enumerations in the Constitution. That's what has destroyed family and community. It's not capitalism, because we know this, because we had capitalism in place before community fell apart. You know, and this is what this guy has been taught. And this is where the unhappiness comes in. This is where the unhappiness of those people. Just picture for a minute a billionaire. Here's a billionaire, right? And here are three people. Here's one person who says, that billionaire has more than me, and I want some of what he has. I want to take some of what he has so I have as much. Okay. Second person says, that billionaire has more than me, but I have what I need and I don't care. The third person says, that billionaire has more than me and I want what he has, and therefore I am going to do what he has done. I'm going to build a company. I'm going to do something incredible that people will pay me $1 billion to do. Of those three people, which is the least happy? Surely it is the person who is envious. I mean, we know this. This is what envy does to people. Surely it's the person who says, I want to take something from him. He's got something that I want. Because they're picturing a world where there's just a pool of money and anybody who has some is taking some from you. And that's just not true. History has shown and proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that that is not true. Capitalism generates wealth. It makes new wealth so that there's always more wealth to be had. So if you say, hey, I'm happy with what I've got. He's a billionaire. I hope he enjoys his yacht. I'm happy with my kids, my home, whatever, then you're going to be happy and content. If you say, I want what he has and I'm going to build something, then you're going to be productive, excited. You're going to have a life of thriving and enterprise and in risk, and it's going to be exciting and dangerous. That's the choice you make, but you won't be unhappy like that envious guy. The thing is, it's the socialism. It's the increasing creep of socialism that has made people unhappy, and the fact that he's going to a school that teaches him this stuff. I think when the idea of freedom is lost, when you can see that forcing you to give charity, it's not charity if it's forced, right? It's socialism. It's when you have socialism instead of charity, when you have government instead of community, when you have force instead of freedom, and when you have no dignity as a person because you're just a hunk of meat, you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be envious. You're going to have the worst of your emotions are going to seem legitimate to you, because why shouldn't they? What is there higher than what you and your meat puppet factory are feeling? If you're feeling envy of a billionaire, then that envy of a billionaire gives you some kind of legitimacy. If you don't have a higher level of thought, a higher level of being in which to live in that thought, why shouldn't you act on your envy, your rage? Why shouldn't you get in a woman's face and accuse her of being responsible for killing thousands and thousands of miles away? Why shouldn't you? You're going to be unhappy.